Over the years, things in the world tend to change big time. You know, we get used to one way of doing things and then, out of nowhere, everything switches up. Take the 1920s and 1930s, for example. They were like total opposites. The shift from the 20s to the 30s surprised a lot of people. It's like when you're cruising along with your favorite playlist, and suddenly, someone changes the music to something you've never heard before. Bam, that's a paradigm shift. Now let's talk about something that affects all of us but seems a bit complicated. The Federal Reserve, or the Fed for short. They control money stuff in the US. So these folks thought they had things figured out. They believed that if they pumped up the economy and lowered unemployment, we'd get inflation. Basically, prices going up. But here's the twist. The world changed. We've got lots of extra stuff lying around and digital stuff is taking over. So, inflation isn't the big deal anymore. Instead, the real problem is that central banks like the Fed can't fix things as easily as they used to. They're like the superheroes of the economy, and their powers are fading. And guess what? We're heading towards a time when a downturn, a sort of economic hiccup, is bound to happen. But now these superheroes can't swoop in and save the day like they used to. And that's happening right when the rich and poor are having a bit of a tiff. So, when things are already good, just imagine how messy it'll get when they're not so great. So the Fed had to change its plan near the end of the year. They realized they goofed up, thinking everything was normal when it's not. They saw the signs of trouble worldwide. It's like when you're playing a game and suddenly realize you're losing badly, so you switch strategies. Now, what can we regular folks do to protect our money? Well, first off, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversify your investments. That's just a fancy word for not putting all your money in one place. Gold is a good choice for this because it acts like a safety net. If one part of your investment goes south, gold can balance things out. But here's the deal. Don't go all in on gold or anything else. Be smart and spread your money around. Imagine it's like a buffet. You want a bit of everything on your plate, not just one dish. Right now, lots of people are going all in on borrowing money to buy stuff like stocks and companies. It's like using your credit card to buy a ton of sneakers. It's cool while it lasts, but it can be risky. So what I'm saying is, be careful with that kind of investment. Gold is like the broccoli of your financial plate. It's healthy and balances things out. But you don't want a plate full of broccoli. Instead, create a balanced mix of investments, and you'll be better prepared for whatever surprises the world throws your way. In the end, remember that things change, and sometimes they change fast. The Fed made a shift because they realized the old rules don't apply anymore. So take a page from their book. Stay flexible, diversify your investments, and don't put all your hopes on one thing, even if it's as shiny as gold. You know what? I think having some gold in your investment mix is always a good idea. It's like having different ingredients in your recipe. It makes your portfolio more balanced. But here's the scoop. There are certain times when gold shines even brighter, and those times might be coming up soon. So picture this. Sometimes the economy needs a little boost, like a shot of energy. That's usually when the government and banks lower interest rates and encourage people to spend money. But here's the twist. We might be entering a time when it's super tricky to give the economy that boost. It's like trying to wake up a sleepy cat. It's just not happening. When they can't lower interest rates anymore, they might start printing more money and running up big debts. That's when things can get a bit wild. You see, a bond is like a fancy IOU, and when there are tons of these IOUs floating around, it can get messy. Add to that the promises the world has made, like pensions and healthcare, and you've got a big pile of obligations. Now, when the government starts printing loads of money and making bigger debts, it can lead to the value of money, or currency, dropping. And that's where gold comes in handy. Gold doesn't lose its value like regular paper money can. It's like having a rock-solid friend who never lets you down when times get tough. But here's the scoop. I think in the next few years, things might take a turn for the worse. Yep, there could be more economic problems, like too much stuff being made and not enough people buying it. That can lead to companies struggling, debts piling up, and even political issues thrown into the mix. It's like a recipe for trouble. And you know what they say? Recessions are like that uninvited guest at a party. They always show up eventually. The only question is when they'll crash the party. And I'm seeing signs of this happening not just in one place, but all around the world. In Asia, Europe, and the good old United States. So let's take a step back and look at the big picture. I believe we're heading into a period where things might get a bit bumpy. But don't hit the panic button just yet. With the right mix of investments, including a pinch of gold, you can weather the storm. Remember, it's all about having a balanced portfolio, like having a variety of snacks at a picnic. Gold is like that evergreen treat that never goes out of style, but you don't want to eat just that. You need a mix of goodies to keep your financial picnic enjoyable. So keep your eyes on the horizon, stay diversified, and don't put all your eggs in one financial basket. And who knows, maybe things won't get as bad as we think. But it's always better to be prepared, just like packing extra sunscreen for a day at the beach. All right, let's break this down. There are some big things happening in the world of money and finance, and they're kind of like the ingredients in a recipe that's about to change. So grab your apron and let's get cooking. First off, we've got this thing called the debt cycle. Imagine it's like a wave that goes up and down. Right now, we're riding a wave that's been going for a while, and it's getting pretty late in the game. The key to this wave is the ability of central banks, like the money bosses of a country, to shake things up. They do this by lowering interest rates and doing something called quantitative easing, which is basically them buying stuff to stimulate the economy. Here's the catch. We've been doing this for a while, and it's starting to lose its magic touch. It's like having a toy that you played with so much it's not as fun anymore. This is a big deal, but it's not an emergency happening right this minute. It's more like a storm that's on the horizon, maybe coming in the next year or two. We can see this happening in places like Europe, Japan, and even in the good old USA. Now let's talk about something called the wealth gap. That's the space between the super rich folks and the rest of us. Think of it like the distance between a fancy mansion and a regular house. This gap is causing a lot of tension, kind of like the way things got tense back in the 1930s. When there's a big gap like this, it can lead to some major disagreements. It's like when you and your friend can't agree on what game to play, but on a much bigger scale. And when policies change because of these disagreements, it can shake up the financial world. For example, when they lowered corporate taxes, it made stocks go up because companies had more cash to play with. So, this wealth gap is a bit like a thunderstorm in the distance. You can see it, and you know it's coming. But wait, there's more. China is in the mix too. It's like a new kid on the block challenging the old-timer, the United States. This challenge is creating a bit of a trade fight, kind of like what happened in the 1930s. It's like two siblings fighting over who gets the last piece of cake. This trade tension isn't just about who gets the biggest slice of cake. It's also messing with how things are made and delivered. We used to have a system where different countries worked together, like gears in a machine. But now, with all this tension, countries want to be more independent. The US says, "I'm not sharing my cool tech," and China says, "I can't rely on you for tech anymore." This shift is like changing the engine in a car. It's going to affect how smoothly things run. So, when you put it all together, it feels a lot like what happened in the late 1930s. These changes won't happen overnight, but they're slowly cooking in the background. Picture it like a big pot of stew simmering on the stove. It's going to take a year or 3 for this stew to be fully cooked, but when it's done, it's going to taste different from what we're used to. Now let's talk about a word that's pretty heavy: depression. It's not just feeling sad, it's when the economy takes a massive hit. Think back to the years 1929 to 1932. That's when things got really rough. Unemployment rates shot up, and the economy shrank by a whopping 10%. It was like a punch in the gut. So, here's the kicker. I think we're in for something like that. Yep, I do. And here's how it played out back then. In 1933, they started printing tons of money and launched government programs to get things rolling again. It's kind of like what we're seeing now with all these cash injections and support programs. But here's the part that might make you gulp. It takes a long time for the stock market to bounce back, and for the economy to get back to where it was. It's like when you drop your ice cream cone and it takes forever to get a new one. So, yes, I believe we're in a situation like that, and it's not just a little hiccup. It's more like an engine that needs a serious overhaul. So there you have it, we're in a time of big changes. It's like the world of finance is shifting its gears, and we're all along for the ride. Keep an eye on the horizon, diversify your investments, like having different types of snacks at a party, and don't put all your financial eggs in one basket. It might not be smooth sailing for a while, but with the right recipe, you'll come out of it just fine. Okay, let's break this down in simpler terms. Right now, we're in a phase where the government is creating a bunch of money and moving it around. They're doing this to deal with the economic challenges we're facing. It's kind of like when you rearrange your room to make it more comfortable. What you're seeing is a mix of creating money and sharing it with different folks in society. This process usually lasts for a few years, maybe 2 or 3, and then things start to get back on track. It's like when you have a big mess to clean up, and after a while, your room starts looking nice and tidy again. The cool thing is that humans are pretty good at figuring things out. We're super inventive and adaptable. So, when these changes happen, we'll find creative ways to make things work better. It's like when you get a new puzzle and at first it seems tough, but eventually, you figure out how all the pieces fit together. I did a study that goes way back, like 500 years back in time. It shows how economic activity has been going on all this time. Sure, there are some bumps along the way, like these depressions we're talking about, but they're just blips on the radar. People and societies have a knack for adapting and coming up with new ideas. So even though things might seem a bit rough right now, remember, we're dealing with money and credit, things that can be managed. Just like when you run out of your favorite snack, you find something else to munch on. The world might change a bit, but we'll figure it out and things will get better. It's like shaking up a snow globe. It looks chaotic at first, but then it settles into a new, beautiful scene.